Ayuni Hamunuddin. And on behalf of the ASEAN Taxonomy Board, thank you for joining us today. To ensure an optimal listening experience for all, we have muted all attendees. If you have any questions, we encourage you to submit them via the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. Please remember to specify who your question is for or indicate if the question is for all panelists. Please also take note that this webinar is being recorded. We will now begin the webinar with the opening remarks. Please welcome Yang Mulia Tuan Mardini bin Haji Edi, Deputy Managing Director, Monetary Operations Development and International at the Brunei Darussalam Central Bank and the Chair of the ASEAN Taxonomy Board. Tuan Mardini, the floor is yours.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, distinguished members of the ASEAN Taxonomy Board, esteemed panelists and valued participants. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good afternoon from Bandar Seri Begawan, Brunei Darussalam. Firstly, I extend a warm welcome to everyone for taking the time to attend this webinar. We hope this will be an informative, insightful, and useful session for our participants and the ATB as well. Today, we aim to highlight the practical uses of the ASEAN Taxonomy for Sustainable Finance, or the ASEAN Taxonomy version 3, and explore the latest developments in the ASEAN Sustainable Finance Taxonomy landscape. It is a pleasure to see a lot of people have signed up for this webinar online, showing the keen interest in this subject in helping drive the growth of sustainable finance in the ASEAN region. Ladies and gentlemen, the need for a robust and well-defined sustainable finance framework in ASEAN has become more critical to address the impacts of climate change in light of the recent shift to prioritize economic interests ahead of the ESG agenda. Furthermore, the importance of climate change adaptation and resilience has grown in recent years. In addition to climate change mitigation, particularly for ASEAN member states that are more vulnerable to climate impact. As such, the ASEAN Taxonomy has and will continue to provide guidance on these environmental objectives to cater to the needs of our diverse ASEAN region, to underscore ASEAN's commitment to sustainable regional growth while ensuring no one is left behind. As a transition taxonomy, the ASEAN Taxonomy serves as an overarching guide to assess activities across ASEAN to orientate financial flow towards sustainable activities across the region, while also complementing the national initiatives of our individual member states. Established under the auspices of the ASEAN Finance Minister and Central Bank Governors Meeting, the ATB is tasked to develop, promote, and maintain the ASEAN Taxonomy. The ATB includes representatives from the central banks and monetary authorities, as well as capital market and insurance financial regulators of every ASEAN member state, making the taxonomy truly a unique and inclusive initiative. Interoperability and alignment are key development principles in the ASEAN taxonomy architecture and design. Each ASEAN member state's national taxonomies can be mapped to either the foundation framework or the class standard of the ASEAN taxonomy. This reinforces the ATB's intent that the ASEAN taxonomy is the taxonomy of equivalence for ASEAN member states' national taxonomies. The ATB has sought to future-proof the development of the ASEAN taxonomy since its release in 2021. Its approach, particularly in incorporating the transition imperative, has gained international recognition, notably from international regulators, real economy participants, and financial institutions. In a recent engagement with an international industry association, the ASEAN taxonomy was commended for its practicality, particularly the traffic light system, which enables a pragmatic transition to sustainability. Esteemed guests, the ASEAN Taxonomy version 3, finalized on 20th December 2024, has been supplemented with additional foundation framework use cases for SMEs and a frequently asked questions document. To enhance the usability of the ASEAN Taxonomy version 3, incorporated input from a targeted stakeholder consultation exercise comprising financial institutions, government agencies and ministries, international organizations, and civil society organizations. The feedback received was largely positive, with the need for one, increased capacity building efforts to raise awareness of the ASEAN taxonomy as well as other national taxonomies, both at the national and regional level, and two, clearer guidance on how to implement the ASEAN taxonomy and tools that can encourage adoption. The ATB is pleased to report that entities in the Philippines, Thailand, and Malaysia have referenced the ASEAN taxonomy criteria to raise sustainable financing for various types of sustainable financial instruments in 2024. We look forward to featuring some of these use cases in today's webinar, and we hope participants will find this particularly useful. The ASEAN taxonomy has also been named as one of the three acceptable taxonomies by the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of the Abu Dhabi Global Market, regarded as one of the three most influential taxonomies in a Texas report called the New Geography of Taxonomies. It has also been referenced by the National Utility Company in Malaysia, Tenaga Nasional Berhad, in its transition finance framework. And finally, it was referenced by PT Mandiri Bank in Indonesia in its sustainable finance framework and transition finance framework. The ATB continues to be committed to develop a practical and relevant tool for our diverse region that has considered feedback from stakeholders. The taxonomy is being developed progressively, and I am pleased to announce that version 4 of the ASEAN taxonomy, targeted for publication by the end of this year, will provide complete coverage of all 6 focus and 3 enabling sectors. Some of the key considerations for version 4 include, firstly, tier setting basis and methodology for the new focus sectors, such as agriculture, forestry and fishing, manufacturing, water supply, sewage and waste management, information and communication, and professional, scientific, and professional sectors. Secondly, the reinforcement of alignment between the ASEAN taxonomy and ASEAN member states' national taxonomies, where the ATB will continue to align thresholds for comparable activities with the relevant taxonomies. And finally, ongoing capacity building and awareness efforts, which the ATB is reinforcing in 2025 with additional engagements. Ladies and gentlemen, today's webinar will explore the practical uses of the ASEAN taxonomy. Participants will also have an opportunity to hear the most recent developments shaping the sustainable finance landscape across ASEAN, gaining valuable insights from both national and regional perspectives, and understanding how these are being aligned through the ASEAN taxonomy. We encourage you to actively participate, ask questions, and engage in the discussions. Our hope is that by the end of this webinar, you will have a clearer understanding of how the ASEAN taxonomy can be practically applied and the exciting developments that are unfolding in sustainable finance across our ASEAN community. Thank you once again for your participation. We appreciate that you have taken the time to be with us today. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuan Martini, for those insightful opening remarks, which has concisely highlighted ATB's achievements so far and has set the stage for our webinar today. Next on our agenda is a presentation on the introduction to the ASEAN taxonomy, including its latest stage of development, finalization of version 3. Presenting this will be Mr. Khairul Rizwan, General Manager of International Affairs at the Securities Commission Malaysia. Mr. Khairul is also an alternate board member of ATB. SC Malaysia chairs the ATB's working group on market facing and resourcing. Mr. Khairul, we look forward to your presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam MC. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and good afternoon. Yang Mulia Tuan Mardini bin Haji Edi, Chair of the ASEAN Taxonomy Board, members of the ASEAN Taxonomy Board and participants to this webinar who are online. My name is Khairul, and before we start today's discussions on the use of the taxonomy and I think developments of the national taxonomy, perhaps it's good if we take a recap of the developments on the ASEAN taxonomy itself leading up to the current finalized version 3. So sorry, perhaps if I could have assistance moving the slide forward. Okay, thank you. So perhaps a bit of background to set the scene for the ASEAN taxonomy itself. So how it came about. And in 2020, there were a series of roadmaps and reports on the way forward for sustainable finance, which were published by several sectoral bodies in ASEAN, representing the central banks, the insurance regulators, and capital market regulators. So these roadmaps, setting the stage for the ASEAN's transition or sustainable finance journey for the next few years, set forth various recommendations, but I think one of the common themes among them was the recognition that although we in ASEAN have that ambition to meet sustainability targets, to enhance sustainable finance in the region, but we are a group of countries with different levels of development, and the most important aspect of our journey is one of transition. And as we transition to more sustainability, we should be looking at a way to balance economic development, social justice, together with achieving sustainability targets. So this notion of a just transition, a just and affordable transition, was laid out in these reports. And I think these reports mention that when we do facilitate the transition, we should be looking at a gradual and phased approach, looking at tiered approaches that certain nations can commit to, and also the need to move gradually to get to that perfect point, and the acknowledgement that some progress is better than none at all. So that shaped the recommendations to come up with a regional taxonomy and more guidance towards transition, which were in these reports as well. And diversity is something which is very real in terms of different sets of circumstances among our countries. This slide shows the different GDP per capita of the various ASEAN member states. And when we look at management of carbon emissions, reduction of emissions and so on, the starting point in terms of emissions profile differs from country to country. For some of us, most of the emissions come from transport. For others, it comes from power generation. And when it comes to power generation as well, the sources of these of energy is a key factor to be considered as well. Coal is remains an important form of energy, and I think the retirement of these coal-fired power plants in favor of more renewable energy sources, is something which should be carefully considered as well, bearing in mind that many of these coal-fired power plants are quite young in the region. So, and in addition to that, in terms of net zero targets and net zero ambitions, differs as well among the ASEAN member states. So there is no one ASEAN target for net zero, but I think a mixture of 2050, 2060, and 2065 among the ASEAN member states. So I think all that sets the stage to to the fact that the taxonomy, when we looked at it, has to be something which has had in mind countries with different starting points, different trajectories, despite the fact that we have one common eventual ambition. So this led to the design of the taxonomy. So firstly, when the taxonomy is used, it's meant to assess activities which can be deemed sustainable or green. And firstly, it must, to do that, it must fall within one of four environmental objectives, as you see to the left of the screen, either climate change mitigation, adaptation, biodiversity, or resource resilience and transition to a circular economy. And in addition to one of those four, it must meet three essential criteria, which is, it should do no significant harm to any other of those environmental objectives. If it does, there should be remedial measures to transition. And lastly, there are social aspects to be considered as well. So I think as Chair Madini mentioned in his speech just now, there are two ways to assess alignment with the taxonomy. The foundation framework, which is principles based, and a plus standard, which puts or provides more detailed technical screening criteria based on 6 focus sectors and 3 enabling sectors. And common, I think, between these two approaches is the fact that there is a traffic light or tiered system. Unlike at the time, taxonomies which tended to be more binary, which is either you comply, either you are green or not. The ASEAN taxonomy had in mind the transition of its constituents, of its member states, and that is why it had a tiered approach. The first tier, which is the green tier, is aligned to global net zero targets and the Paris Agreement. But the next 2 tiers, tier 2 and tier 3, are amber tiers, which was slightly more flexible in terms of the criteria to encourage a transition to more sustainable practices. With the idea that these 2 tiers would be sunset at a certain period in time to encourage movement to the green tier. So that in a nutshell is I think the approach for the tiered system, the traffic light system, which reflects the transition approach of the taxonomy. And um, a demonstration of this, or how it can be seen in terms of the activities which are laid out in the plus sector, can be seen in this screen as well. So as you can see, there are the three tiers, either green, amber, or amber 2 or amber 3, which has different levels of technical screening criteria. But that does not necessarily mean that transition tiers are applied in all cases. So an example of this here is where certain activities can be seen only as green with no way or availability of to transition. So an example of these, as you can see here, these are the criteria for the energy sector. So for example, electricity generation from wind power or solar photovoltaic technology, which are solar panels, are in itself green, and you don't have any transition tier there. So the ASEAN taxonomy does make that distinction as to which tiers can benefit from transition and which do not need the transition criteria. So you would have this across the various sectors in both the energy sector, construction and real estate is an example of where you may have a green tier and a second amber tier. And while we were developing these criteria, we felt that in some cases there is no need for a third tier. Say, for example, in the construction of new buildings where reference is made to certification schemes and so on, where you could distinguish between the level of tiering by the levels of certification that the building achieves, whether platinum, gold, or so on. So that's how we make that distinction between amber and green. And there are some where there are no technical screening criteria provided at a certain point in time, perhaps suggesting that in the future we may want to introduce such tiers. But also, similarly to where there are no TSCs available, we feel that the green standard is the green tier is the standard to be achieved. So if I could move on, so the examples can be seen in all the sectors of the plus standard. So one, I think, final example to mention where I think there are no amber tiers available is in the criteria for carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So CCUS, I think, is the activity of capturing emitted carbon dioxide and storing it in a facility. So for that, again, you only have one tier, green, with no amber tiers. So if we could proceed, one of the more unique criteria that the ASEAN taxonomy rolled out earlier on in version 2 was coal phase out. At the time, I think many the common thinking was that there should be no financing with regard to coal activities. However, this is a carve out of that, in that the financing available is not to encourage, although it's coal related, but is meant to phase out activities in relation to coal. And for that, we had three tiers as well, green, amber, and amber 2 and amber tier to sort of encourage the journey to early retirement of these coal-fired power plants in the region. So moving on in terms of transition finance, the ASEAN taxonomy also, works well, or is a companion, or rather, the ASEAN Transition Finance Guidance, which was issued in 2023 and 2024, is a guide for entities to transition their activities to a more sustainable activities. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, the ASEAN taxonomy is an activity-based reference point. But together with the transition finance guidance, which encourages pathways for entities to transition, it is both a complementary set of documents to encourage transition by entities in the region. So I think there has been recognition as well in terms of, by the International Energy Agency, which referred to the ASEAN taxonomy and the ASEAN Transition Finance Guidance, providing a valuable framework for the financial industry to improve credibility and transparency to capital providers. So what I've presented so far has essentially been confined to the environmental objectives and the technical screening criteria with regard to that. But if I may just touch on the approach to the essential criteria, which all activities must comply with. The first is to do no significant harm. So essentially, this means that an activity that contributes to one objective does not cause significant harm to another environmental objective. So this is done in the foundation framework and plus standard in different ways. In the plus standard, it is addressed through guiding questions that are set out in the main report of the ASEAN taxonomy. Whereas in the plus standard, specific criteria set out in Annex 2 needs to be met. So for DNSH requirements in the plus standard, this includes the identification of Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions to the activity, potential risk to other people or assets, and the management and minimization of emissions. For climate change adaptation, there must be a climate risk and vulnerability assessment report that should be undertaken. And for EO3 and EO4, the requirement of an environmental impact assessment report and a life cycle assessment report. So, and as I mentioned earlier, where there are issues with regard to DNSH, there should be plans to remedy the situation. This is the remedial measures to transition. And also the social aspects would need to be covered as well. So I'm mindful of time, so I will go on to the grandfathering rules. An important aspect of the taxonomy is to ensure that there is confidence by investors as to the technical screening criteria and what happens when an activity qualifies under a certain set of criteria, and what happens in the future when those criteria change or is sunsetted. So the ASEAN taxonomy has put into place grandfathering rules to ensure that in certain cases, if you qualify under the taxonomy at a certain time, and I think you have not identified the purposes of your utilization of proceeds yet. You have a grandfathering period of 7 years after the screening criteria has been amended to initiate or to spend your money for those proceeds. So in terms of utilization or application of the ASEAN taxonomy, we tend to think of it more for financing and funding, but of course, we can also use the taxonomy in terms of policy making. Governments may use it, regulators, and the issuance of financial instruments, but also the planning of transition pathways and so on. So I will skip this section on uses of the taxonomy and assessment of the taxonomy, because this will be covered by our next session, the panel session. Interoperability also is something that we will cover in the second panel session as well. But this slide demonstrates that there are several national taxonomies that have been and are being developed by our constituents within ASEAN, and they are aligned with the ASEAN taxonomy in the ways as you can see on screen so far. Perhaps Tuan Mardini mentioned this as well as to, I think, the stakeholder consultation that we have done for version 3. And in terms of the way forward, we are looking at or are developing version 4 of the ASEAN taxonomy currently. And this will cover the remaining 3 focus sectors and 2 enabling sectors, which will, I think, complete the present version of the taxonomy by the end of this year. Now, there have been, I think, various recognitions made both at the ministerial level and also by independent parties, also the region's taxonomies as well in referencing the ASEAN taxonomy and aligning themselves to the ASEAN taxonomy. So the ASEAN taxonomy, I think, has gained a reputation and credibility in terms of a transition which, a taxonomy which has been able to make that balance between credibility and also inclusiveness and practicality for users in the region. So I think without further ado, I will stop here. And I think the ASEAN taxonomy, I think, which can be found at various places within the ASEAN websites, the ASEAN Capital Market Forum, and also Sophia websites. And we will be sharing that in the chat as well. So thank you very much. Hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Khairul, for the presentation. The brief yet detailed overview of the ASEAN taxonomy serves as an excellent primer for our next segment. As the ASEAN taxonomy has matured into the present version 3, implementation becomes all the more crucial in the minds of potential users. Our next session will explore implementation matters and use cases, including those involving entities which have already made use of the ASEAN taxonomy. Moderating the session is Mr. Eugene Wang, CEO of Sustainable Finance Institute Asia. Sophia is the host of the ATB, which advises on and helps the ATB coordinate its taxonomy development work. Notably, prior to his current position, Mr. Wong was Managing Director of Corporate Finance and Investments at SC Malaysia, where he led SC's various ASEAN related initiatives, particularly those initiatives for sustainable finance at the ASEAN Capital Markets Forum, among others. He also has served as a member of the Audit Oversight Board in Malaysia and was an advisor to the Malaysian Accounting Standards Board. Joining him on the panel of speakers will be Ms. Fonte Putasiri, sustainable finance expert slash consultant at the Asian Development Bank. As an ADB consultant, Ms. Fonte specializes in sustainable finance. She supports corporates and state-owned enterprises in developing sustainable finance frameworks to issue sustainable bonds and advises policymakers in developing robust sustainable finance ecosystems. Next is Mr. Thomas Leonard, Head of Section Sustainability Services, Supply Chain and Product Assurance at DNV. Mr. Leonard leads sustainable finance assurance services across Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia. Based in Bangkok, Thailand, he has over 14 years of experience with DNV, focusing on reshaping sustainable finance landscapes. Last but certainly not least is Mr. Jairus De Silva from DNV. Mr. De Silva is a skilled sustainability consultant with 10 years of professional experience working in manufacturing, supply chains, natural resource management, and energy. Prior to DNV, he worked in key management positions at manufacturing companies in Canada and led various production projects across North America, often engaged in sustainability and compliance programs. With that, I will now hand over the floor to Mr. Wong to commence our discussion.
Thank you very much. So we heard quite a bit just now about what the ASEAN taxonomy is about and how it's structured. But what's going to be really interesting is how the taxonomy is being used or can be used. And today we have a group of experts here to share with us their real life experience with the taxonomy and how it has been able to help them in what they do. So I'd like to turn to Thomas first. Thomas, not many people know what assessors do. Not many people know about the work DNV does, but I know you deal a lot with taxonomies, and certainly this is a very useful part of the things that you do in your daily assessor type activities. Can you share maybe with the audience what you do as an assessor and how taxonomies come into play?
Okay, sure. Yeah. Really doing things like external reviews, such as second-party opinions. That's actually my normal day job. So effectively, what that is, it's a third-party assessment of a financial instrument to determine whether or not it meets the various different standards and principles for being considered a sustainable financial instrument. Now, it's a service we've been providing for many years. It's not new. It didn't come with the taxonomies, but really before the taxonomies were available, the question of whether or not something was green tended to be somewhat subjective to the assessor. So what we have found is with the taxonomies, we need to be very aware of them now, because although there have been cases where we actually cite the taxonomy in the second party opinion, and you've seen some of these here, and we'll talk a bit more about them later. We are always very aware of the fact that the taxonomy set the expectation about what is considered to be green. So we always need to be very well aware that when we assess something as green, that we're not doing something which is very clearly opposed to the relevant taxonomies.
Thank you. Maybe we'll move on to Kun Fontip first, and I want to come back and pick up on the point you made just now. So Kun Fontip, what do you do? What does the ADB do, and why are you interested in taxonomies?
Can you hear me? Okay. Actually, I would like to thank the ATB to having me for this panel discussion. Let me first start with our program, the technical assistant program that we support our clients, both private sector, public sector, and SOE issuers to issue sustainable bonds. As a development bank for Asia, ADB provide a technical assistance to help the issuer to develop the framework as well as to support them in the process of issuing sustainable bonds. Right. The program is called GSS Plus Bond Initiative, which GSS stand for Green, Social, Sustainable, and other label bonds. So this is our program that we supported our clients. So the objective of this initiative is to scale up the GSS Plus bond issuance in the region, as well as develop the local bond market. So this is what we have been done for the our client. Starting from 2020, we have supported more than 20 transactions in the region, which catalyzing more than 3.5 billion USD until now. So maybe I stop here first.
Thank you. Thomas, so just now you said that you need to be aware of taxonomies. So before the taxonomies came into being, what did you look to? And how were you able to determine what was green? And do taxonomies make a difference in that regard?
Taxonomies certainly do make a difference. Really, I mean, bear in mind, of course, there has been a taxonomy in existence for a few years now, which is the CBI taxonomy, which we have to use when we're doing an external review against the climate bond standards. But that isn't technically something which we had to use for as a reference document for a second party opinion. Generally, there was a sort of institutional understanding of what was considered to be a green activity, and we have a backlog of second party opinions which we've conducted all around the world, and it was always quite important that we needed to make sure we weren't contradicting ourselves in the various different second party opinions. So there was a sort of, let's just say, an unofficial taxonomy in the sense that this is what we had traditionally always regarded as a green activity. The other thing which the taxonomy has really brought in, and the taxonomy has brought in some standardization to that process, and it's not just the DMV opinion. It's there are also other external reviewers available. I won't name them here, but the other thing which is which the taxonomies have brought in, which I think always tended to be a bit of an afterthought, was do no significant harm. That DNSH was I think probably not considered sufficiently in second party opinions, and it is a very important part of assessments. For some assessments, it's the main part of the assessment, and I think we're becoming, the industry generally is becoming much more cognizant of the fact that it has to be considered in an external review.
So it's really interesting because in the past, we didn't have official taxonomies, but we had a market taxonomy, which was used when that particular standard was being assessed against. But now we have official taxonomies, which actually provide a more common language, I guess, when you say standardization. And I want to turn to Kun Fontip now and ask, how have you found taxonomies helping the work that you do in ADB? And in the past, I mean, coming back to what Thomas was saying, what did you use and how are taxonomies an improvement?
Yeah, thank you. I think previously we try to align with the international principles like ICMA, ASEAN standards, right? But the taxonomy help us to provide a clarity as well as a clear guidance when we discuss with our clients. For example, in some cases where the activity could be considered green or maybe some controversial issue, then having a taxonomy in place would help us to discuss with the client more easier. As well as I mentioned earlier that our program is to develop the local bond market, right? Having taxonomy will help to enhance the credibility and transparency of the bond market as well. So I think the taxonomy, either like regional taxonomy or local taxonomy, would help the issuer to ensure that they can align with international standards and avoid greenwashing as well.
Great. Let's talk about some real life cases. So Thomas, DNV was actually the second party opinion provider for the Bangkok Expressway and Metro Sustainable Finance Framework. I just wanted to understand a bit more about what your experience was there and how the taxonomies are useful.
Yeah, the BEM project was actually done in, it's an interesting project because it was done in two parts. The first part of it was we were actually asked to consider if the technical screening criteria met the requirements of the ASEAN taxonomy. That's actually very straightforward because it's electric trains, and electric trains are pretty much as a standard considered to be green under the TSE, not just in ASEAN but in every taxonomy. We were asked to come back later, but that wasn't considered to be a full assessment against the ASEAN taxonomy because we didn't conduct a DNSH study in the way in which is required in the ASEAN taxonomy. We were asked to come back and conduct a full assessment, which included DNSH, and actually the DNSH discussions were I would say much more comprehensive than the initial assessment of TSCs. And again, you sort of have to, when you think about it, it's actually quite understandable. You know, if you're building a network of electric trains, yes, they're considered to be green, but then you need to consider things like, well, what's the impact on biodiversity? What's the impact on adaptation? And this is a big issue in Bangkok. You know, Bangkok is already a city prone to flooding. You know, what provisions have been made to make sure that the system won't fail in the future as a result of flooding? These are underground trains, remember. And you know, also things like, you know, what were the policies for recycling, circular economy, and so on. And these were all things which are covered in the second party opinion, which is publicly available. And we did it in the manner which is prescribed by the ASEAN taxonomy, which I think is quite a good way. It's quite a good structured way of doing it.
So Thomas, would you say that one of the big advantages of the official taxonomies that have come on is that they force you to think about not just doing good, but about the trade-offs to environmental objectives and how we address those objectives?
Yes, certainly. And I'd say it's a particular advantage of the ASEAN taxonomy, which is, as we know, a particularly good taxonomy. You know, it is the consideration of greenness. You always have to think there are certain things which are considered basically green by their nature, is the phrase we use in the ASEAN taxonomy. You know, wind farms, solar farms, and so on. Electric vehicles, as long as they're zero tailpipe emissions, are considered to be green with little further consideration. But the question of DNSH is actually quite critical because there are trade-offs for some of these things. You know, if you build a wind farm, if you build a solar farm, what land did you have to use? What access roads did you have to build? Where did you build the transmission lines, and so on? And there are a lot of concerns. And also, you know, solar farms, what are you doing with end-of-life equipment? And that's true for wind farms as well. And I think it's what the taxonomies, and again, particularly the ASEAN tax does this in a particularly structured way, is it forces you to think about how these things are being dealt with.
And the ASEAN taxonomy and actually our ASEAN member state taxonomies, most of them actually do allow for remedial measures transition. So it does allow projects and activities which have been trade-offs initially to happen, so long as those trade-offs are realistically and reasonably rectified over a period of time. And I think that's a very important feature of the ASEAN taxonomy. Punfonte, ADB supported the Thai Provincial Electricity Authority in its issuance. How was the ASEAN taxonomy used there?
Maybe I can start introducing the issues by the Provincial Electricity Authority or PEA first. Actually, we help them to develop the framework for sustainability bonds issuance. So it's combined with both green and social. The green project are the renewable energy, for example, the microgrid, the off-grid, right? And the other project is the climate adaptation, which refer to the submarine cables extension to the island, right? So they also have the social project to extend the electricity transmission to the agriculture area and the new rural area. So this is the framework that we help them work with them to develop. And the key part is that it is the first social and SOE utility provider in Thailand that issue sustainability bond. So we have find it challenging as well as interesting to work with them to find the angle of how their existing project could be considered green. So what we come up with the taxonomy is that we try because there's limitation on their mandate because PEA is procuring and distributing the electricity, but they don't have mandate to or they don't have a control of the electricity to be like to make green. So this limitation actually help us to be more innovative. We discuss with them to explore whether which climate change mitigation or adaptation could be considered for their project. So what we found out is that based on ASEAN taxonomy, as the transmission activity can have like environmental objective of the adaptation. So we think that it could be the aspect that this project or can the submarine cable can be used. So we also explore and find the research and study on how this project can address the climate impact. For example, because the area that we will extend that PEA will extend the submarine cable will be on remote island. So we think that this project would help to make sure that the electricity in the island will be enough for the people, for the tourism, as well as to support the purification of the water. So in this regard, we think that this project could be considered under the climate change adaptation. So this is the way that ASEAN taxonomy actually help the issuer to find the right category as well as to demonstrate that their project could contribute to environmental objective.
So I did want to add to that. The very important point with the Koh Samui situation, of course, is that Koh Samui is already an area stressed by lack of availability of fresh water, and we assessed the interconnector as an EO2 green project because it was shown that that stress would increase as a result of climate change in the future. So the interconnector was necessary for providing desalination on the island, as well as having to deal with all of the other measures which are being brought in, such as electric transportation, such as greater amounts of renewable energy. And also, to be clear, although it was assessed against EO2, I think over the long run, it will also support renewable energy on Koh Samui and Koh Phangan, because there will be over time a greater implementation of green energy on those islands.
So this is a very interesting aspect because often when people talk about investments, they talk about the mitigation aspects. And the other very interesting point that's come out from both of you, and particularly what Kun Fontip was saying, is that everyone seems to think that taxonomies are most useful in helping the providers of capital, but in reality, the users of capital, the issuers actually benefit significantly because it provides clarity to them as to what qualifies and what doesn't. Jairus, is this your experience as well? I know that you were involved in the Sustainable Finance Framework of a Malaysian company, WASCO.
Yeah, thanks, Eugene. So yeah, as Thomas and Kun were also mentioning, it's usually seen a lot in the market where people try to show alignment towards green classification. So a very interesting case as well that we've worked on at DNB is the case with WASCO, which is works in the oil and gas and electricity generation sector, where they were trying to show alignment to the amber tiers of the ASEAN taxonomy, which is very unique, again, because of taxonomies like the EU taxonomy, which is very binary. A lot of people kind of tend towards that, you know, you're either green or not green, but where's that middle zone? And this is where the ASEAN taxonomy comes in as a very useful tool to classify investments as being transitioned. So the case with WASCO is they developed this integrated framework, which basically means they wanted to look at elements of use of proceeds as well as sustainability linked financial instruments. And with that, they wanted to really quantify or show a measurable decarbonization strategy. And they were currently in this transition phase. So the reason why this is also very useful for the market is because investors, even financiers, can see something measurable rather than just practice-based approaches that a lot of other issuers or even borrowers may lean towards. So, for example, when you set certain targets or thresholds like the ASEAN taxonomy does for energy generation, you know, it's listed down as carbon intensity in terms of how much CO2 you're emitting per kilowatt hour of power generation. They were looking at basically ramping that down over a certain period of time when they're currently not in the green zone. So this is very useful for a lot of banks, financial institutions, where they can see credibility towards what companies are doing. And at the same time, it sort of really ties in sustainability strategies that a lot of companies are trying to implement, and using the ASEAN taxonomy as a guidance really brings everything together to support transition mechanisms.
Thomas, I want to come back to the Bangkok Expressway and Metro transaction. And I actually looked at the second party opinion. I looked at the framework as well. It's very interesting because the framework actually references several principles, guidelines, and standards, as well as the ASEAN taxonomy and the Thai taxonomy. So I'm just wondering, you know, why have so many references? Why not just have one? And as a provider of a second party opinion, what are the challenges you have when there are multiple references, and how did you handle it in the BM case?
Well, the principles and references that we use are determined by the customer. So we do the assessment against whichever principles, standards, and so on that the customer asks for. And it's not uncommon for them to ask for multiple references. So, for example, you might want to do it both against green loan and green bonds, because you might have a framework that covers both loans and bonds. But actually, the assessment is not that different for both of those anyway. You may also want to assess it against the ASEAN green bond standards or the ASEAN green loan standards. There may be some particular reason why the bond or the loan is being marketed in ASEAN, and the customer is asking for that. But again, generally speaking, when you're talking about these principles and standards, although there are differences between them, the general processes are more or less, well, not the same, but they're very similar, such that it's not like doing it 4 times. It's only slightly more effort. So that isn't really that much of a challenge. That's the principles and standards. There are also the taxonomies. Now, there are differences between the taxonomies, and again, BEM is in Thailand. We were asked to do it against both the Thailand taxonomy and the ASEAN taxonomy. Now, the Tier C was actually not that problematic because, again, they're electric trains. Really, both taxonomies say the same thing. Electric trains are considered to be green. They do have somewhat different procedures for DNSH. We actually did the assessment using ASEAN taxonomy, which we feel does actually fulfill the requirements for Thailand taxonomy as well, because they do ask for the same points to be covered. But again, what is quite good about the ASEAN taxonomy is how structured it is and the processes it makes you go through to demonstrate DNSH. But as I say, by doing that, we feel that we are meeting the requirements of the Thailand taxonomy as well.
So would you say that using 2 taxonomies is not a liability, it's actually advantageous, because what you can do is look at the national priorities and agendas and meet those to fulfill what the country needs, and at the same time have a common language which investors can look at?
Yes, I think so. I mean, it's remember that the taxonomies, when you're at green, are not actually that different. Again, there are certain differences, but to a large extent, they're quite similar. And again, there may be particular reasons why the customer wants it to be done in a certain way. They may be, you know, and again, I can't speak for every customer because they may have their own reasons for doing this, but there may be certain signals that they want to send to official regulatory bodies that they're meeting the specific taxonomy of that country, as well as having a broader view. But I do think that what the ASEAN taxonomy does is to support interoperability between the different taxonomies, because we are able to map the ASEAN taxonomy against the other different taxonomies. So if we do an assessment against the ASEAN taxonomy, it does help us to understand where would we be placed with the other taxonomies as well.
I'd like to come back to that word you used just now, interoperability, later on. But in the meantime, I'd like to ask Kun Fontip about her experience with the Thai Provincial Electricity Authority and how you apply the ASEAN taxonomy.
Yeah, I think our experience working with them is very actually valuable for us, as we have a lot of lesson learned and like many things to learn from them as well. So from our experience, to implement the Thailand the taxonomy, I think we started with discuss with them to make them familiarize with the TSC as well as the DNHS first, and to see and assess whether they could meet the requirement or not. So this is the first step that we try to implement the taxonomy with them as the SOE and they are in the energy sector. So we suggested them to look at the taxonomy, both ASEAN and Thailand taxonomy, whether like which one or either maybe both of them that they can apply. So from the results that we assess with them and propose to DNV later for the SPO, is that because of Thailand taxonomy don't have EO2 or climate adaptation objective for in the Thailand taxonomy. So that's why it's a little bit different from BEM. So that's why we have to we decided to go for the ASEAN taxonomy because they have like broadened environmental objective. So in that case, when we come to the NHS requirement, the template, for example, the CRVA climate risk as CRVA, yeah, and the life cycle assessment help us and the PA a lot to understand of what is needed to fill in terms of providing the information to make sure that they can align with the ASEAN taxonomy. And in this case, because of the Thailand taxonomy don't have the EO2, but we hope that in the future, here when it comes to the interoperability in the future, if the local taxonomy extend to other EO, we hope that the interoperability will help us to make the existing framework align with the emerging criteria as well. So it not only help the PA to align with like more taxonomy, but it also easier for them to report by using the same data set to report for both like different taxonomy in the future.
So there's the word interoperability again. I think we really need to come back and talk about this. But in the meantime, Jairus, I wanted to ask you, I mean, you're an expert in taxonomies. Where else have you seen the ASEAN taxonomy being used?
Yeah, so well, firstly, before getting into that, I also wanted to highlight that even in cases where taxonomies are not mentioned for assessments, as Thomas was highlighting, that clients or customers usually select the principles or standards they want to be assessed against. Even in those cases where a taxonomy may not be selected, they still play a very large role in influencing how the market progresses or proceeds in terms of a green or a transitionary activity or investment, because taxonomies really set the baseline understanding for what can be considered green. So with that in mind, we're seeing a lot of uptake of the taxonomy, ASEAN taxonomy, other national taxonomies as well within the region. Examples like Tenaga Nasional, SMBC in Indonesia, Mandiri, BD Unibank, all of these within the region, as well as some outside the region, are referencing the ASEAN taxonomy when they try to look at green classifications or green tiers for certain projects and investments. But I've also seen clients or customers trying to reference the ASEAN taxonomy when they want to look at transition mechanisms. And that is one of the very key points as well, where we see the ASEAN taxonomy being used for, its credibility in setting certain types of decarbonization trajectories. One example is customers that I've spoken to in India or even China have looked at targets set for activities within the ASEAN taxonomy to, seek DNV's advice on what can be credible for KPI verifications, right? So even when the taxonomy is not being used in assessments for second party opinions, they are still being looked at to consolidate various types of sustainability strategies. So this is something that's very important and something that can really, set a benchmark for what can be carried forward once all these sectors have been published in the ASEAN taxonomy.
There is a point that it's maybe not immediately obvious. But Jairus and I know this because we work in the industry. The whole sort of regulation of external review, sustainable finance assurance, is becoming much tighter. I mean, you see this in Europe. It's now the European Union taxonomy is a regulated taxonomy. You need to be qualified. You need to be registered with the European Union to do it. Even though that's not the case in ASEAN yet, it may become the case in the future. But the various different organizations, such as DNV, that provide sustainable finance assurance, they're generally speaking regulated by standards. The one we work to is one called ISA 3000, which is the assurance services standard. We have internal control procedures that ensure that we meet that standard, and they actually require us to make reference to a taxonomy. We actually have to do it, even if it's not written into the report. So the report you see online, won't necessarily say anything about it, but for our own internal quality control, we're actually required to say, yes, we looked at a taxonomy when we were doing this. So there's stuff going on in the background that you may not, may not be obvious to everybody, but it's certainly affecting. I mean, I can't speak for other organizations which provide the same service, but I can certainly say in DNV, these taxonomies are having an impact on our control procedures, and not just the ASEAN taxonomy, but the other ones as well.
I just, sorry, just wanted to quickly tag on to that as well. One thing I also just forgot to mention is with all of these requirements, like under ISAE, there's even requirements from the other side. So MDBs like, ADB or even World Bank, IFC, they can sometimes also set their requirements when they want to issue certain loans to companies, right? That they may want to see alignment with certain types of taxonomies. So this is where it's very useful, where now organizations are also taking that step, one step ahead of time, where they want to look at these taxonomies for validation or verification of certain KPIs or trajectories that they may be pitching forward.
That's a real industry secret. So I'm really glad we have the two of you on the panel. Okay, so Kunfontif, Jared's just dropped you in, so talked about MDBs. So what else do you see from the ADB perspective, taxonomies being able to do, and where else can they play a role?
Oh, okay.
I think that's put it
in-
quite close.
Okay. In addition to the bond issuance, I think the taxonomy is very useful for the banks and the corporates to understand their portfolio or their revenue sources, which will help them to mitigate the risk from climate, as well as finding the opportunity from the climate change as well. And for banks, knowing which asset is taxonomy aligned or not, then will help them to engage with their client to help them to mitigate the risk, as well as improve their resilience. So it will be leading to the physical risk, transition risk, then leading to the credit risk, which will go back to the banks, right? So, and I think for the policymaker, it's also very useful for the policymaker as well, because for example, the budget tracking, climate budget tracking, if the government conduct the climate budget tracking, then they will see the overview of where the budget go to, and whether it help to meet the climate target or not. In addition to that, it will provide ministry accountability for each ministry as well. So it's not going to be the accountability or responsibility for Department of Environment only, but actually any department in the government who support the climate target and commitment as well. So I think in a nutshell, it will help the government to monitor the environmental impact from the public spending.
So it appears that taxonomies have many users and many users as well. It's just a question of how you apply it. And I want to come back to an issue that Jairus had raised just now, and he talked about the amber tier. So Thomas, the ASEAN taxonomy and our member state taxonomies, they're all really created to facilitate transition. How well do you think a role they're playing?
I think the taxonomy is very important for transition, particularly in ASEAN. This is not the European Union. I think we do need to recognize that there are certain activities which need to be classifiable, which in the EU taxonomy wouldn't necessarily be regarded as green activities, and certainly certainly at least for a defined amount of time we should be doing this. I think that it's important that there's kind of joined upness between the ASEAN taxonomy and the ASEAN transition finance guidance. I have been looking through the ASEAN transition finance guidance, and it does tend to be very EO1. It's very concerned with emissions, which is, you know, that's fair enough, but I think it is important that we also recognize that there are transitional activities which are not necessarily just the EO1 activities, and I think the ASEAN taxonomy does also help us to do that, and it helps us to understand, look, what do we consider to be a transitional investment? What can we justifiably call a transitional investment during this transitional period?
Thank you. Let's come back to that word interoperability, which both you and Fontic raised. And I want to layer that with something else, which is what you've said about the issuers. So it is really a situation of complexity now, because every country has different circumstances, economic and social. They have different access to resources. They have different starting points. So as a result, possibly as even a preemptive move, they develop their own taxonomies to address national priorities and national circumstances. And the result is a mushrooming of taxonomies, right? We have over 50 official taxonomies that have been developed, under development, another 150 plus significant private taxonomies. And this may be causing a bit of fragmentation. And look at it this way. Imagine if I'm an Indonesian business with a Japanese partner. I'm trying to start a new project. I'm taking a loan or getting debt financing from a European bank who's based in Singapore. Essentially, I have to start worrying about the Indonesian taxonomy because I'm based there. I have to worry about the EU taxonomy because my financing is coming from the EU. But hang on, they're disbursing through Singapore, so I will want to also use the Singapore ASEAN taxonomy. The partner I have is Japanese, so the Japanese, they don't have a taxonomy. They might use the ASEAN taxonomy. And of course, for the issuers, it may not be that for the providers of capital, it may not be that tough because they just look at what applies to them. But for the issuer, they've got to find the sweet spot. So this fragmentation is gradually becoming a challenge, and interoperability, as both of you mentioned, is important, particularly for the issuer. What are your thoughts on this? And I'll start with you first, Thomas, and then ask Kun Fontip for her thoughts.
Yes, I mean, there's an important point here. You know, we do tend to compare the European Union with ASEAN quite a lot, but the European Union and ASEAN are very, very different in many different ways, but two very key ways, which are quite relevant to what we're talking about. First of all, Europe might be diverse. ASEAN is much more diverse than, you know, it's diverse, I would say, culturally, but it's also much more diverse from a kind of economic and developmental point of view. And you can't really have a one-size-fits-all solution for ASEAN. I don't believe. Also, the European Union is a political entity. You know, it makes laws. It has a parliament. It has a commission, and so on. And I don't think that's you know, at least not in the short term, a realistic objective for ASEAN. You know, the member states do still retain their sovereignty to a much greater degree than is the case in the European Union, and need to be able to set their own targets, I think, to meet their own very, very specific needs. Having said that, I don't fear the fragmentation really certainly not at green. You know, for reasons I've been saying before, I think there's generally quite a lot of commonality when you're talking about green anyway. I think where the issue on interoperability comes in is much more when you're talking about amber, because there is quite big differences between the different taxonomies, and I do see the ASEAN taxonomy as let's just say a guide to taxonomies, as something which allows you to benchmark different taxonomies against each other and see, look, is this something which would be regarded as amber under the ASEAN taxonomy? And if so, would it be tier 2? Would it be tier 3, and so on? And I think it allows you to look at, this is what Thailand says, this is what Indonesia says, this is what Singapore says, this is what Vietnam says. Where can I place that within the ASEAN taxonomy? And it gives you a good signpost for where you are, if it's important for you to have an international comparison of where your taxonomy is. So that's my feeling about the value that the ASEAN taxonomy brings to interoperability.
So it's sort of allowing you to address issues locally, but also being able to elevate it to something regional or global. And it's very much what DMD Mardini said in his opening just now. I mean, the ASEAN taxonomy is meant to be the overarching guide and common language. So the ASEAN taxonomy then can help member states achieve equivalence with each other through the ASEAN taxonomy. It's a very interesting point. Kun Phantip?
Yeah, from my perspective, I think the divergence of taxonomy can pose the challenge for issuer, especially when they have to decide whether they will go for the which taxonomy. And we also receive a common question about which taxonomy they should refer to, for example, ASEAN or local taxonomy. But on the other hand, I think having different taxonomy will also provide flexibility and more options for the issuer as well. So this is in the case of we developed the framework for the PEA. I think for the starting point and the pathway can be different between each taxonomy, but as long as the objective or the target will be like similar, then I think it would be okay, and it will help the issuer to select whether they will go for the local taxonomy or regional taxonomy. But as Kun Thomas said that ASEAN taxonomy, we see ASEAN taxonomy as a benchmark. And then we can discuss with the issuer whether this could be one of the taxonomy that they could consider, or they can go for the more detailed, I would say, taxonomy, like a local taxonomy, because from my experience, local taxonomy sometimes will be more detailed compared to the ASEAN taxonomy, which provide like a more broader definition or TSC. So I think interoperability would be one of the important thing that if they can be like compare or explain that, okay, what is the difference between those taxonomy, it would help issuer to even become more comfortable and easier for them to select.
So that's a really pertinent point you raised, because when the ASEAN taxonomy was first conceived, it was conceived as a taxonomy of equivalence, not just the interoperable taxonomy, but a taxonomy of equivalence for all our member states. So we've heard a lot about the advantages of using a taxonomy, the benefits, but there are also challenges. So I wanted to ask you, Jairus, what have you seen with regard to the opportunities and the challenges for the ASEAN taxonomy, and how can we scale up its use? We've seen it being used already, but it's really, really going to be most useful when it's scaled up. How do we do that?
Yeah, so one of the strengths of the ASEAN taxonomy is that it has this multi-tiered approach. You have foundation framework and the plus standards, and then that's broken down further as well into how you can do assessments depending on what's relevant for an issuer. One of the biggest challenges that comes with this, that at least I've seen through my work, is the lack of technical expertise usually from issuers. So that's usually tied to capacity building. So I think what needs to be done is to just really keep informing or educating or providing, let's say, workshops for a lot of issuers on how to use certain elements of the taxonomy when undergoing assessments. So to give you an example of what I mean with this is, I think Kun Phon was mentioning it earlier about challenges with DNSH, using the CRVA, or even undergoing LCAs for the different environmental objectives. What I've seen from a lot of issuers is that they tend to back out when they face this obstacle, or they think of it as an obstacle, when in reality, from an assessor's point of view, or what Thomas and I see, working at DNV, is that it's not a hard set sort of criteria that needs to be followed immediately. Let's say when you're trying to invest in a project, or when you're trying to build a certain type of asset, right? It's just a guidance. It's something that needs to be done to seek classification. So if you're seeking financing for something that's not being built yet, or that hasn't been built yet, you won't be expected to provide documentation or evidence of DNSH or CRVA and things like that. You have time to provide this. And these things can also come up naturally through the course of your investment, or through the course of your project coming, to life. Perfect example is that the use of EIAs, environmental impact assessments. Those are usually a mandatory step for a lot of infrastructure projects or assets that are being built. And within EIAs, there is information on climate change adaptation, on life cycle assessments, and all of these just bring that information together for assessors like DNV to basically put it together and provide an assessment against the taxonomy, or showing that an issuer can meet, the criteria under a taxonomy. So with all of that, I think that's, at least from my perspective, one of the biggest challenges is just trying to bring that information forward for issuers or project owners, and to just help them understand that, although like the taxonomy is not all that scary, because it lays out so much criteria or various different types of methods for assessments, it is a very simple process that can be followed. You just need time to understand it. And that's something that I think can be done through a lot of capacity building.
Those are very rich insights. Can I ask Kun Tim and Thomas to also just share your views in a minute each?
Yeah, I mean, just very quickly, I think Jerris has raised actually a very important point, and one again that's maybe not immediately obvious. Remember that a lot of our external reviews are related to projects that don't yet exist. They're theoretical projects which will happen in the future. So, well, how do you do an assessment of that? Well, the customer comes to you and says, well, we commit ourselves to follow the requirements of the ASEAN taxonomy, or other taxonomies are available, but the ASEAN taxonomy. So that's a commitment. They can write it down, and then you can say, well, we come back in a year and see if you actually did it, see if you actually followed the ASEAN taxonomy. And it's a very useful tool for doing that.
If I can add several points on that, I think the implementation would be most challenging part, and capacity building as well as the sharing of case studies or use case would be very helpful for the issuer to understand and see the picture how it will be like when they consider taxonomy. And the other point is that I think the understanding of top management is very useful and maybe very important, because in the PA case, the top management commitment is helping us to try to find a way to align with Thailand with taxonomy, as well as to develop the framework. So I think the top management buy-in and commitment to make sure that their framework will be aligned with taxonomy is very essential. Thank you.
Oh, that's all very instructive. Thank you very much. So we've run out of time with that, and I'd like to ask all of you to join me to give a round of applause to our panel and thank them for their time and wisdom.
Thank you, Mr. Wong, and our sincere thanks to our distinguished panelists for sharing their valuable insights. Our next segment will be a panel session addressing national taxonomy approaches and updates and alignment to the ASEAN taxonomy. Mr. Cairo will return to moderate this session, and joining him on the panel are representatives from the ATB, who are also involved in developing the national taxonomies of their respective countries. Our first panelist is Mr. Tawachai Pitayasofon, who is the Deputy Secretary General Fundraising Enforcement, Accounting Supervision, and Sustainable Development at the Securities and Exchange Commission, Thailand. Mr. Tawachai joined SEC Thailand in 2008 as a legal advisor and has continuously expanded his expertise in legal and corporate governance. Since 2023, he has been deeply involved in sustainable development, particularly in ESG disclosure, sustainability-themed bonds, and the development of the Thailand and ASEAN taxonomies. Also joining us is Mr. Jarod Suroyo, Deputy Director of Sustainable Finance, Department of Surveillance and Integrated Financial Services Sector Policy of the Otoritas Jasa Keuangan Indonesia. His directorate coordinates and develops policies, prepares infrastructure, and monitors the implementation of sustainable finance in the financial services sector, and conducts cooperation with national and international stakeholders. Mr. Jarrett has over 18 years of professional experience in the financial services regulator. His current work in sustainable finance covers various areas such as Indonesia's Sustainable Finance Roadmap, Indonesia's Taxonomy for Sustainable Finance, preparation for the adoption of sustainability disclosures, and other related sustainability finance policies. At the regional level, he serves as an alternate vice chair of Working Group 1, Conceptual Framework and Principles of ATP. Our third panelist is Attorney Emma Valencia, Assistant Director of Markets and Securities Regulation Department, Securities and Exchange Commission, Philippines. Attorney Valencia spearheads the SEC's review of rules, guidelines, and frameworks for market institutions and market participants. Her leadership extends to ensuring the consistency of new financial products and services with the Securities Regulation Code and other relevant laws. Her responsibilities also encompass the review and proposal of new or amended SEC rules to address emerging areas of the capital market and align with international best practices. Notably, her team was instrumental in drafting and recommending for approval key SEC rules, including those on crowdfunding and the guidelines for the issuances of sustainable thematic bonds, encompassing green, social, sustainability, sustainability-linked, and blue bonds. And with that, Mr. Cairo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam MC. So we have a distinguished set of speakers from the ATB here for this panel session. Happy to have you all here with us for this panel discussion. I think perhaps before we go into the session itself, we've received, I think, some questions through the question and answer session. So just to clarify that, perhaps we will address some of those questions after we go through the moderated discussion for this panel session. And for those questions that we can't address during the webinar itself, we will try to address them offline. So I think without further ado, we'd like to go into this panel session on national taxonomy approaches update. So I think the purpose of this session itself, as I mentioned in I think my opening presentation just now, there are a number of countries within the ASEAN region which are developing their own national taxonomies. And they have referenced the ASEAN taxonomy and demonstrated in different ways alignment to the ASEAN taxonomy as well. So today we'll be having conversations with representatives from three of these ASEAN member states, namely Thailand, Philippines, and Indonesia, who have I think come up with different iterations of the taxonomy. Some have just introduced the taxonomy. Some have come up with second version of the taxonomy, and so on. So the Philippines, for example, released its Sustainable Finance Taxonomy Guidelines, or SFTG, in February 2024, which is a principles-based taxonomy. Indonesia released the second version of the Indonesia Taxonomy for Sustainable Finance, TKBI, in February 2025. And Thailand has done a public consultation of its Thailand Taxonomy Phase 2 in October 2024. So I think going straight into perhaps our discussion, I have a question for all the speakers here, which is what were the factors and philosophies that guided development of the latest iterations of your national taxonomies? And what were the main challenges faced, if any, when developing and implementing these national taxonomies? So perhaps we will go according to, I think, the seating arrangement here. I'll ask Pak Jarod to answer that question first. And I understand that there is, he has some slides to illustrate his points. If we could ask colleagues to bring that up, please.
Yeah.
Pak Jarod,
Thank
please.
you, Pak. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning for all of us. Thank you for having me in here as OJK representative in this forum. And great honor as well, being here with all of you, but also the speakers from the Thailand and also the Philippines. Before answering the question, I think I have one or two slides there about our journey, because this is what we call something like the background of our concept here. You know that so far we have a lot of things that we do in order to support the sustainable finance development in Indonesia. What we've done ongoing and also what next project you can see in this slide. You know that in general, we already have the regulation regarding to the implementation of sustainable finance since 2017. We have the regulation, first regulation regarding to disclosure sustainability reporting, and then green bond or sustainability bond, social bond. We already have since 2017, revised in 2023. We also have carbon exchange on there. And then taxonomy, of course, and one step ahead, we ongoing process to release the second version also in CRMS. CRMS is like climate risk management and scenario analysis, how to embed the climate risk in the risk management from financial institution as a whole. And you can see from the red dot on there, if we are talking about the taxonomy, already we already have since 2022, Pak Khairul. We have Indonesia Green Taxonomy, you know, that released not too long from the first version of ATB, ASEAN Taxonomy for Sustainable Finance. And then we revised in 2024 to better alignment with the ASEAN Taxonomy as well. So from Indonesia Green Taxonomy being Indonesia Taxonomy for Sustainable Finance that cover the energy sectors. And then lastly, in February 2025, we cover another sectors, something like construction, real estate, transportation, storage, and some activity in Avolu. Actually, we rely on the development of Indonesia taxonomy, rely on the development of the ASEAN taxonomy as well. So back to your questions, I think we are talking about the basic philosophy. We are talking about how to complete and to fulfill the ecosystem of sustainable finance in Indonesia. Of course, we have something infrastructure on there, and I think taxonomy is a very crucial things to classify green and or not green activity. Last slide maybe about our framework of the taxonomy. Can I, yeah, the factors that also what we call in developing our taxonomy, of course, the need to, sorry,
I
back
think it's a
to,
different,
yes,
yeah.
this one, yeah. I think the need standard definition, the common language in Indonesia. Previously, we have a taxonomy in 2022, and then the need for the capital allocation, and then how to minimize the multiple interpretation on greenwashing, etc. And then we also talking about the global and regional development, also the factors to push Indonesia having the taxonomy. We have EU taxonomy, ASEAN taxonomy, of course, crucial factor, the main drivers for us to develop our own taxonomy. And then the second question about the challenges, I think, yes, the most challenging thing was about the stakeholder engagement, but in our experience, yeah, for some 2 or 3 years in developing our taxonomy. The first one is about the stakeholder engagement, and the second one maybe the collaboration. You know that OJK, as the initiator of the Indonesian taxonomy, is, yeah, let's say the expert in financial sectors, Pak, yeah. But we are not expert in energy, we are not expert in IPP, etc. So we need the collaboration with all of the stakeholders in Indonesia. Without their engagement, we are nothing. I mean how to create the credible and also how to create the good taxonomy is a very what we call crucial on us. And I think the most challenging thing after we have the taxonomy is about the usability. When setting our taxonomy, we need to think that we are the developing countries in Indonesia. If we want to balancing the interoperability, let's say the EU taxonomy and ASEAN taxonomy, also we need to balance with the Indonesia or national interest. As I mentioned before, we are the developing country. So the factors like the interoperability, like the Indonesia national interest, and also the push of the drivers from the regional, especially ASEAN taxonomy as our overarching guide. I think some of what we call the factors that push us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But I think it was from your first slide, it was interesting that I think you started from the broad roadmap for sustainability, and I think the taxonomy was one of the things to achieve that. And I think I hear you very well as well, that one of the challenges is on the stakeholders. We are not scientists, as you said, so we do really need that interaction with the various other stakeholders in our respective countries and region. So perhaps I could ask the same question to Attorney Valencia. Emma, what was your experience in the Philippines?
Okay. First of all, Khairul, I would like to thank the ATB for inviting the Philippine SEC in this panel and then share our journey in the development of the Philippine Sustainable Finance Taxonomy Guidelines, or the SFTG. Actually, one of the compelling arguments for the immediate formulation of the SFTG is that the fact that the Philippines remains to be always on top of the World Risk Index of countries most vulnerable to climate change effect, particularly such effects on the extreme weather events. So because of that, as countermeasures, again, loss to the Philippine GDP will increase in the years to come under the business as usual or do nothing scenario. So therefore, as countermeasures, the Philippine government has set in place a whole of government approach captured under key policy responses and national strategies such as the National Adaptation Plan and the Philippine Nationally Determined Contribution Implementation Plan. So key to achieving this, of course, is a just and orderly transition that involves financing activities, financing projects and activities that support this transition, and to mobilize different sources of financing. The Philippine Financial Sector Forum, composed of the Philippine SEC, the Philippine Central Bank or the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, and the Insurance Commission, undertook to develop this SFTG. The SFTG will serve as a common language for economic activities that significantly contribute to environmental objectives, which are considered green. The SFTG design extensively draws from guidance provided by ASEAN Taxonomy, more particularly the adoption of the foundation framework, the environmental objectives, the essential criteria, the general assessment process, and it also adopts a traffic light system, which includes an amber classification to cover transitional activities, ensuring optimal inclusivity. Our initial focus on the two environmental objectives, which are the climate change mitigation and adaptation, account for the national priorities such as our NDC implementation plan, but with the view of adding the ecosystem, the biodiversity, circular economy, as well as potential social objectives in the future iterations. The adoption of the foundation framework, which is based on the principles of inclusivity, is intended as a starter assessment approach, allowed us to face our approach and take the first steps towards a threshold-based taxonomy, considering the readiness of our regulated entities or the local entities in terms of the data collection and internal policies, while still allowing a wide range of users to utilize the taxonomy and facilitate capital flows to economic activities that further the sustainability objectives. The sectoral coverage of the SFTG is based on the sectors identified in the Philippine NDC implementation plan and the National Adaptation Plan to ensure alignment to broader national priorities and aspirations. The SFTG also adopts a traffic light classification system and uses a set of guiding questions and decision tree to complete the assessment. On the challenges faced by the Philippines during the development phase of the SFTG, the Financial Sector Forum member regulators faced by the FSF members. Firstly, of course, as mentioned earlier by the previous speakers, the minimal to lack of awareness and technical knowledge of the regulators on the taxonomy and the related assessment processes. Secondly, the state of readiness of our supervised entities, given the varied level of maturity of these entities in sustainability integration. And lastly, data availability, which greatly affected the decision by the government on the appropriate principles of the SFTG. That is whether to adopt a principle-based or threshold-based approach. To address these challenges, we have sought bilateral meetings and engagement with our Malaysian counterparts, the Bank Negara Malaysia, the SC Malaysia, and as well as the SOFIA, to leverage on their experience and better understand the taxonomy development and other taxonomy development process in the region. We also had a stock take, of course, on the readiness of our supervised entities and the available climate-related data that led us to initially adopt a principle-based approach based on the foundation framework of the ASEAN taxonomy. So I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. I think interesting. You mentioned earlier on one of the impetus is that the Philippines is affected by I think climate change, adverse weather
Strong
conditions,
typhoons, the flooding,
and so on. Yes, so I think your environmental objectives as well, mitigation and also adaptation. Someone remarked that mitigation is you helping the rest of the world. So this is about overall carbon emissions and all that, but adaptation is you helping yourself. So I think that's important to balance, the benefits to your own, citizens as well as to the world at large. So thank you for that, for sharing that, Emma. So perhaps we could move on to Kun Tawachai. Thailand, I think, has moved on to the second phase already. So
Okay,
glad
thank,
to
thank
hear
you
your
for
experiences.
thank you
Thank you.
again for inviting me to speak here on behalf of the SEC Thailand. Actually, the creating the Thailand taxonomy for SEC Thailand is only a part of it because, as everyone say, needs to everybody, collaborations, many organizations have to work together. Actually, we started from the 2021, led by the Bank of Thailand, the Office of the National Resources and Environment Policy and Planning, and the SEC Thailand. We launched the phase one as to, build up the more sustainable ecosystem for Thailand. In the phase one that we launched on the 2023, and it's covered the energy and transport. That's the most, two largest emission for the greenhouse gases in Thailand, which accounted for almost 70% of it. And now we are at the state of finalization of the second phase that we expanded the taxonomy to cover more sectors. That's including agriculture, building and real estate, manufacturing, and waste management. Altogether with the first one, we have covered over 95% of the greenhouse gases emission in Thailand already. By the first half of this year, if we launch the phase two, so we have the taxonomy that cover nearly all the economic activities that matter most to the climate alignment for Thailand. And if you're talking about the philosophy, I've laid out three philosophy that we work to achieve the Thailand taxonomy. The first one is very important. Many people say about it already. It's about the international alignment. At the very beginning, we start working on Thailand taxonomy. We look closely on what artists were doing at that time, EU, ASEAN, other countries, and also we not just basically copy them. It's not just like that. We take it as the directions and we adapt to serve the local realities. It must work and make sense for our local context as well. Unless otherwise we wouldn't get the buy-in from the stakeholders. And the second one is the policy coherence. The taxonomy must serve the national policy as well. For Thailand, it supports the national climate targets, including NDC by 2050 carbon neutrality commitment and our 2065 net zero target. And also right now we are in the process of developing the law on the Climate Change Act, which is supposed to be submitted to legislature soon, I think. But if this law, come into effect, the taxonomy also serves as the reference points for the new policy, just like the GSG mandatory GSG reporting and carbon pricing as well. So basically, the Thailand's taxonomy will play a part in shaping the Thai economy to be the greener economy in the future. And the third one, very important as well, practical implementation. Taxonomy is simply the documents. If it's not, it's very hard to develop already. But if we cannot make it into implementation, it's not going to be meaningful at all. So how we deal with this? We know that we have to apply the data-driven process to select the activities that matter to us. Thus, we use the three filters. The first one is the environmental materiality. How much emission or impact and activity generates to the ecosystem. The second one is technological feasibilities, whether or not the proven decarbonization solution exists. And the last one is economic relevance, how important the activities to Thai economies and the jobs in Thailand. For example, in the agriculture sectors, we focus on key crops in Thailand such as rice, sugarcane, and cassava, which are not the only emission intensive, but also central to the Thailand rural economy. While in the manufacturing, we prioritize activities like cement, steel, and plastic production, which is hard to abate, but very critical for industry. And what we have to do is we have to ensure that the taxonomy developed is both scientifically sound and local relevance. Then we talk about the challenges. This is not easy, it's difficult, but we have to try it. The main challenges we found since the phase one development was the building awareness and encouraging the stakeholder participation, especially from the sector beyond finance. At that time, the concept of taxonomy was entirely new. We had to dedicate significant efforts to explain what it is, why it's matter, and most importantly, how it can be useful for them. And to address this in the development of the phase two, we conducted multiple focus group discussion, and we translate the taxonomy in Thai as well as to make sure that it's accessible and we get more and meaningful feedback to develop the taxonomy to be usable in practice mostly. And also, we also form a working groups that including representative from all ministry, industries, and financial institutions. By leveraging the network from all these stakeholders we engage, we were able to reach wider pool of experts and stakeholders across the different sectors. Okay, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Kun Tawachai. I think interesting that you said a lot of the areas that were developed, the criteria. I think you looked at the circumstances in Thailand, and I think it's important to make it practical for use of the Thai industry as well, Thai people and so on, which I think is a nice segue to the second question that I want to ask all of you, which is on interoperability. I mean, we are talking about the ASEAN taxonomy today, and of course, the issues of interoperability is one of the I think areas we want to cover in this session. So how do you reconcile alignment and interoperability with other international taxonomies? And this includes the EU taxonomy, even ASEAN, I think we can consider an international taxonomy with your country's specific needs. And how do you enable your local industry to meet standards that are achievable while ensuring your respective taxonomies are seen as credible internationally? So again, next round, Pak Jarod first.
Yeah. Thank you, Pak. That's a good question. Let me back to our framework of Indonesia taxonomy slide. I just want to show you that we using what we call the ASEAN taxonomy as our main reference. Previous slide.
Previous slide.
Yeah, this one. Pak Khairul, you can see in here, we have similar and the same 100%, right? The environment objectives with the ASEAN taxonomy. We have 4 environmental objective, and then essential criteria consists of DNSH, and then RMT, and also social aspect. And then the only thing that difference is about the classification. We have green, transition, unqualified. We don't use red, but we use unqualified and on there. But thanks God, we have the transition. You know that nowadays the transition is very crucial in our sustainable finance development to financing the transition project. And then Pak Khairul, the next slide. Yeah, as I mentioned before, how to balance the interoperability and also the national interest is very challenging. But you can see in here the development of the Indonesian taxonomy rely on the ASEAN taxonomy, right? But you know that the ASEAN taxonomy and then another taxonomy like the EU also take into account. Also, we got the inspiration about the program Taxonomy Navigator, right? In the EU, in Indonesia, we initiated this program this year. But in concept, we have the Rumah Tumbuh in Indonesia, or in stages, yeah, in development of the Indonesia taxonomy. After finishing the last version of ASEAN taxonomy, we also published our last version of taxonomy, covering not only the energy, but also construction real estate, construction storage, and Avolu. Some Avolu activities like the palm plantation, we already have it, because there are some concern from our government that we need to do it soon as possible. But just take a look the results of the ASEAN taxonomy this version, right? This year version to know our next version. You know that the most important things is how to reconcile, to create or to get what we call the credible taxonomy. For us, we have the provisions for green classification should be 100% interoperable with the global, with the ASEAN taxonomy. Let's say if you're talking about the power plant, let's say 100 grams CO2 per kilowatt hour should be green. We have the same threshold. We have the same threshold with Thailand, with Singapore, with the ASEAN, and also with EU. But for the transition classification, we fine tuning based on our Indonesia condition. Let's say if we're talking about power generation, we using tier 3 from the ASEAN taxonomy. So the number for the threshold is 510, if I'm not mistaken. And then, to be honest, we also need to considering our national initiatives from the government as well. So that's why we adding some sectors, we adding some activities in our taxonomy. For example, in version 1, we adding some cases, some activities like coal phase out activities and also critical minerals. And in version 2, we also adding some initiative like what we call under consumptive financing, and then carbon capture and storage, sustainable aviation fuels, and last but not least, the construction for low-income communities. You know that low-income communities, residential areas is one of national project in Pak Prabowo, our president. So the balancing about this one, I think, is a very crucial.
Thank you, Pak. I think that was a good demonstration of how you balanced, I think, equivalence and interoperability with ASEAN together with, I think, trying to serve your national interests as well. So Emma, can I pose the question to you as well?
All right, Khairul, thank you for the question. When we were developing the SFTG, the FSF, the Financial Sector Forum, was mindful of interoperability considerations to avoid fragmentation that may decrease the credibility of activities, and then hence lowering the number of potential investors and inhibiting the flow of capital. So I mentioned earlier that a part of our pre-developmental stage, we engage with the Bank Negara Malaysia, the SC Malaysia, and Sophia to understand the taxonomy development processes of other AMS jurisdictions, as well as the ASEAN taxonomy, thus referencing key documents, including widely used taxonomies and other national taxonomies. These were the guiding principles of the SFTG. I also mentioned that the SFTG also aimed to align with key national strategies, aspirations in climate change action, as well as consider the maturity and readiness of the supervised entities in the sustainability integration. To strike the balance between these two considerations, we face the development of the SFTG. This guarantees the effective, iterative, cooperative, and ever-focused development of the taxonomy, allowing assessors and users to qualitatively analyze assessment with the SFTG through the guiding questions and decisions. Currently, the SFTG does not require external assurance. This approach effectively allows for an achievable assessment to users in the least burdensome manner, while ensuring that the SFTG is interoperable to regional and global taxonomies, such as the ASEAN taxonomy and the EU taxonomy, creating an avenue for equivalence, thereby widening investor base. Thank you, Khairul.
Okay, thank you, Emma. I think that's I think you mentioned speaking to the Malaysian regulators as well as you know the ASEAN Taxonomy Board. I think for Malaysia as well, I think our two taxonomies from the central bank as well as the Securities Commission is principles-based taxonomy as well. I think we are the two, I think, which use principles based in the region. So Kun Tawachai, could we ask you that same
This one
question?
is very the core challenge because to know how to stay aligned, with international standard, but also serve the local context as well. As I mentioned earlier, when we developed the Thailand taxonomy, we look closely to the international others EU, the ASEAN, and other countries as well, just to make sure that we are in line with them. But the thing is that for every activities that we put on phase 2 that we are developing, we ask the question whether or not it fits Thailand context. Do we have the technologies? Whether or not we have the capacity. So we have to strike the like balance, Stay international is very important, but it has to be usable in Thailand as well. So this is what we have been working. And while we use the CBI as a scientific source, we always make sure that it's work for Thai context. And what's really helped for us as we adopt the traffic light system as well, we have Amber because for the transition pathway is very important to help the Thai business to, how to have the pathway scientifically measures and also credibly in terms of the, to applying as the taxonomy. And uh, this is what we try to be inclusive, just not to leave the anybody behind. And that's the thing that we trying to do. And the thing is that we got the engagement from the stakeholder by the putting the efforts on the industry consultation. We provide the technical guidance and also the capacity building. And we are very aware that a lot of businesses, especially for the very small one, they need support to understand what the taxonomy means and how they can apply it. But in sum, I would say that to be aligned with international standard, it doesn't mean that we have to everything exactly the same, but we have the same goals and we have the means, the pathway to achieve the same goals that have the credibles and transparent and also serve the local context. That's what we are trying to do in developing the Thailand taxonomy.
Thank you, Kuntawacha. I think that's a very good point that when you talk about equivalence and interoperability, you don't have to match a particular international taxonomy exactly. I think as long as I think the principles remain aligned, increasingly there is this recognition that certain criteria are done to meet the needs of that particular country. Okay, the next round of questions, again, starting with Pak Jarod. When developing your taxonomies, what's your approach when dealing with larger real economy companies or entities? And these are the players or industry members who may be capable of complying with international standards. So they may look to the export market. So they are ready to meet those standards. So you have these bigger players as compared to the MSMEs and smallholders, which may not be as ready as their bigger brothers, but in terms of sustainability adoption, but in aggregate they make up a significant number of the GDP, and in fact may account for a large amount of emissions as well. So how do you strike that balance, and what's your approach in the taxonomy?
Yeah, Pak Khairul, we do believe that the emitters maybe come from the big company and also MSME, let's say. And you know that in Indonesia, we have more than 65 million business units in MSME, right? And around 19 until 20% of bank loans for MSME. You know that we also using the approach from the ASEAN taxonomy. In ASEAN taxonomy, we have PS plus standard, right? And then foundation framework. We're also using these approaches. For the big company, we have technical screening criteria, PS standard. But for MSME, we have sector agnostic decision tree Pak. So just like principle-based and decision tree model with binary yes or no guiding questions to help the users, MSME, to assess the activity in line with the EU and in line with the essential criteria. But we have to know that not all of MSME can cover or can implement this taxonomy. In Indonesia, for the first step, for the first phase, we ask medium-sized company, medium-sized, not all of MSME, but only medium-sized to using this taxonomy. Because based on our assessment, you know that medium-sized company has a very what we call has the significant impact as well on the taxonomy, on the emission as well. So we come up with a pilot project for banking sectors for banks in Indonesia. They maybe in this year, end of this year, or maybe early next year, we will come up with the pilot project for the MSME. So the pilot project cover for all of the banking sectors in Indonesia to it is compulsory for all of banks in Indonesia to submit TKBE report, to submit taxonomy outstanding report, right? So we can assess what percentage of green and non-green outstanding loan, right? And back to your questions again, yeah, we have a sector agnostic decision tree, but for the first phase, we still focusing on the medium-sized company, Pak.
Thank you, Pa. If I may ask a follow-up question, when you say that you have a TKPI reporting, are there any incentives or penalties for non-compliance?
You know that actually this is still moral hazard, Pak. Why? Because we still ongoing process to develop our OJK regulation, right? You know that the regulation about the taxonomy, Indonesia taxonomy, most likely will be what we call collaborate with IFRS adoption in Indonesia. We are ongoing process to IFRS adoption. You know that most likely 1 January 2027, IFRS adoption will be happen in Indonesia, and the taxonomy will be one of what we call one of thing that we need to disclose in our IFRS adoption.
Okay, thank you, Pa. Emma, over to you.
All right. For the Philippines, during the development stage of the taxonomy, we made sure that we get the necessary feedback from our supervised entities to written submission of comments and focus group discussions. The written feedback and participation in the discussion came from the and involved large companies, large real economy entities such as banks, the listed companies, industry associations. So this ensures that we have their necessary buy-in when the SFTG was being developed until it was finalized. But for the MSMEs, we gave them a very particular focus given that about 99.6% of our total business enterprises in the Philippines are composed of MSMEs contributing about 40% of the country's GDP. So their vulnerability to the effects of climate change effects will also greatly affect our economy. So therefore, we believe that the SFTG can also be a useful tool to channel funds to MSMEs mitigation and adaptation efforts. As such, we needed to identify a simplified process for assessment of activities of MSMEs given their readiness and scale. At the FSF, it was decided to do away with the usual assessment procedure before it can be classified under the traffic light system for the small companies. Through this simplified assessment process, MSMEs can align their activities to an appropriate use of proceeds standards. A non-exhaustive list of sample activities was also included as an annex to the SFTG. So this significantly reduced the burden for MSMEs by not requiring them to use the extensive decision tree and guiding questions in their assessment. Only when an appropriate use of proceeds cannot be identified should the MSME's activity shall be assessed under the usual procedure. So this approach allows the SFTG to become an inclusive tool that caters to a wide range of potential users, including the small businesses, small companies. Thank you,
Okay.
Khairul.
Thank you, Emma. So I think similar question. So is it compulsory also on the MSMEs, or is it more to encourage them for complying?
We have special activities for them, like the road shows, encouraging them to also participate in the sustainability activities of the SEC.
Okay, thank you. So Puntawachai, same question. I know you have many smallholders as well in Thailand. How do you address that?
Okay, all right. Maybe I talk about when we developed the agriculture section of the Thailand Taxonomy Phase 2. That, of course, one of the key challenges was how to address the wide range of the capacity among the producers, the large, very large agribusiness to the very small millions of the farmers, something like that. That's very issue. However, we decided not to create a separate framework from the large one and smaller one. We decided to create a single unified approach that can work for everyone. But we, of course, we are mindful that not every producer are at this same starting point. So we create the categorization of 3 levels instead of using the traffic lights. We create the 3 levels, which are the basic practices, intermediate, and advanced. While the basic practices are designed to be the relatively simple and low cost, that to suit the small holders. For example, things like reducing fuels burning, adjusting fertilizer use, or improving soil cover would do. Just to make sure that smallholder could, engage in the taxonomy, just to make it better for the greener economy as well. And these are often more accessible for the smaller one, of course, while the intermediate and advanced practices represent a little bit more ambitious intervention, like you have to adopting more precision irrigations, transition to organic input, and implementing agroforestry system. That's, of course, this is more suitable for the larger producers. The structure allows us to recognize the meaningful action of all levels of producers and encourage the continuous improvement for the all stakeholders in these sectors instead of setting the high bar that only the large producer can pass. And for just to make sure that everyone could take the first step, and that could be inclusive in kind of when you look at the approach that we took. And also we have to ensure that all the practices are aligned with the Thailand environmental priorities and that are practical for the local context as well. Designs draw from multi-year of research and reflect the input from economists and public agency and also on-ground expert in Thailand, just to make sure that it's going to be workable for these sectors. So basically, we are not relying on the drawing between large players and small players, but we focus on that action and we apply the structuring, tier structures just to make sure that we address all the action and suitable for where they are and they can join this journey as well.
I think that's interesting. I mean, replacing a practice-based system in the place of the traffic lights for the smaller entities. So I think, as you said, it's better to start somewhere rather than.
That's right. At least they can take the first step and they can join this journey with us.
Okay, thank you, Kuntawachai. So I think we have a bit more time. So the next round of questions, I think individual specific questions to each. So to Pak Jarod, currently the Indonesia taxonomy covers energy, construction, and real estate. I think, as you mentioned just now, transportation and storage, as well as some activities in the agriculture sector and land use. Others are soon to come, I think. So what are some of the key considerations for the development of the forthcoming sectors that Indonesia will have to keep in mind going forward? Yeah.
Yeah, I think we keep going to follow national determined contribution sectors. In Indonesia, we have 5 NDC sectors, right? The energy, IPPU, waste, agriculture, and Volu. Yeah. And you know that we have done with energy, Volu, construction, real estate, etc. Next program will be cover the IPPU or manufacture, waste, and also some agriculture. We ongoing. Next one will be kick off. Just waiting for the complete version for from the ASEAN taxonomy. We will take up with the Indonesia what we call effort as well. But so the first thing is, of course, we focus on the NDC sector. The second thing, we also take a look on the global and regional development. Let's say in ASEAN taxonomy, we have enabling sectors, right? Like information communication and then professional, scientific, technical activities. I think that's good for us to develop as well. And lastly, maybe we also got the input from the stakeholders, the government stakeholders. You know that they have, let's say, new target or initiative, also the factor to be considered. Let's say we have coal pass out activities 2 years ago, and then this year we have the residential area for low income community, and then carbon credit follow project, and etc. So the combination of that sectors.
Okay. Thank you, Pa. So Emma, I'd like to ask you. So recently, I think SEC Philippines issued a consultation paper on proposed green equity guidelines. So as I understood it, it uses the SFTG as well as the ASEAN taxonomy as benchmarks to label eligible companies as issuing or having outstanding green equities. So it's a kind of like a green instrument. So this seems to be an innovative application of the ASEAN taxonomy and SFTG. So what outcomes does SEC Philippines aspire to achieve from this initiative?
All right. The proposed guidelines for the issuance of green equities in the Philippines was released for public comment last year. It was December last year. When we were developing the initial draft of these guidelines, the outcome we wanted to achieve was to leverage on the equities market to support sustainable activities alongside with the already well-functioning and vibrant fixed income sustainable finance market in the country. In particular, this green equity designation or label will increase the visibility, transparency, and credibility of Philippine companies towards investors, institutional or retail, looking for sustainable investments in equities, regardless of whether they are listed in an exchange or not. This is done by looking at the CAPEX or OPEX of the companies that are invested or utilized towards activities considered green, or by looking at the company's turnover derived from activities considered green. But to share here, what prompted us to use the SFTG and the ASEAN taxonomy in this guideline is the fact that we wanted to avoid the fragmentation of the sustainable finance frameworks in the Philippines that might dampen investor confidence and interest in sustainable activities in the Philippines. So we want to be able to streamline the use of all available tools in the market so that we only have a single source of what constitutes as green, and that is where the taxonomies prove effective and useful. Of course, we also saw the benefit of leveraging the use of the ASEAN taxonomy as credible tool to unlock financing from international investors, while ensuring that the financing flows toward identified environmental objectives and aspirations. This alignment also ensures inclusivity in that investments to and capital turnover from amber classified activities may potentially be considered under a green equity transition designation. So essentially, at the SEC Philippines, we want to demonstrate that sustainable finance frameworks and tools are not mutually exclusive, but they are complementary.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Emma. I think we are close to time, but I think I want to give some opportunities to answer some questions from the floor as well. But I think the last one to Kun Tawachai. So I think earlier on in the previous session, we would I think the panel discussed Bangkok Expressway is one of the companies that has used the ASEAN taxonomy. So in terms of in Thailand for the Thai taxonomy, also the ASEAN taxonomy, what has been the take up from financial institutions and industry with regard to the two taxonomies, and how do we want to scale up this implementation further?
Okay, all right. I think we have seen the encouraging sign for the early engagement, particularly from the financial sectors, because financial institutions now they have started to explore how the taxonomy can be applied for the investment process and aligned with the upcoming policy tools. Now we have received strong interest from the sustainable bond issuers. As the SEC, we supervise capital markets. We have received some interest, from the issuers, and now they are looking to the taxonomies to guide the project the selection and improve the investor confidence as well. And so interesting, we see some issuers that define the use of proceeds to taxonomies already. For example, we have the two issuers. The first one is the Bangkok Expressway and Metro, and the second one, the PEA that was mentioned for the earlier session. They have issued the ESG bond by referencing the ASEAN taxonomy. And in the PA case, they also reference to the Thailand taxonomy as well to serve the local stakeholders. These are examples that the taxonomy is not so simple, the principle of just documents anymore. It has been turned in practice and it's be useful. And of course, it's still very early stage of implementation. We have to, work harder and more, to get the stakeholder buy-ins from this. And for the scaling up, I would say we have three things. The first one would be the streamline the user experience. The platform like Accept that we're talking about, it's in the meetings this morning, is the all countries common equivalence platform for taxonomies. But we have roles to play. It's developed by Sphere, the Sustainable Institute of Asia. This platform will allow the issuers to users to compare the national and ASEAN taxonomies through the taxonomy navigators and access the classification by using the taxonomy analyzers. The tools can reduce the friction between the issuers and the financial institution. They have the comparison is very useful. The second one, we have to link the taxonomy use to the tangible incentive. I will talk specifically on the capital market context. The SEC Thailand is, focusing on the how we can give some incentive to the issuers, and we came up with the idea just to waive the filing fee for the registration statement for them. So maybe some would say that it's small incentive, but it's important, just to scale up and just to let them see that if they try to adapt this kind of taxonomy, they get some kind of reward, something like that. And the last one is very important. There's the investing in the human capitals, because, if you want to ensure that taxonomy will be applied effectively, both national and ASEAN, we have to build strong foundation for professions to understand how the framework works. And this means going beyond just issuing the guidance. We have to train the people across the financial sectors, regulatory agency, and also real economy stakeholders. And this would help, then for the capacity building, everyone will learn more about the taxonomies, and altogether, would help, the use of taxonomy by facilitating the greener eco economy in the future.
Thank you, Kuntawacha. I think those are good points. You said a small incentive, but I think no incentive is too small. I think some in the past issuers have avoided to issue green bonds, for example, because of the second party opinion cost, which seems minimal in comparison. But yeah, I think incentives helps. So thank you all very much. Perhaps we just like to address some questions that came in through the chat function. The first one, came from an anonymous attendee. To clarify, is grandfathering in relation to the period for the utilization of proceeds, or is it for carrying through past guidelines in the instance of new versions? So I think I think this probably arose from my presentation earlier. So grandfathering is the case where there has been an issuance where of securities in relation to sustainable finance, where the taxonomy has been complied with, but the proceeds have not been utilized. So if you look at the grandfathering rules in the taxonomy, if the funding has been raised and the utilization has been identified, the grandfathering rules don't apply in that case. So this grandfathering applies to where the funds have been raised, but the utilization has not been identified as of yet, and process into a new technical screening, a new TSC threshold. So that is where I think you have to hurry up and spend that money. You have 7 years to do so. So I think a brief clarification there. The second question is from a bond market SRO or regulatory perspective. How can sector agnostic sustainable finance criteria be applied fairly across different industries, given the varied sustainability challenges and risks faced by issuers? So I think this question here is with regards to principles-based criteria, principles-based approach, the foundation framework, when we're talking about sector agnostic sustainable finance criteria. So as you know, the Plus standard has very specific sector-focused TSC. But even in the foundation framework, there are guiding questions and use cases that serve as a guide to direct you in the assessment of that activity, even though it is sector agnostic. So in terms of application, the application of it being fair, the ASEAN Taxonomy Board is constantly looking at ways to further enhance this through more use cases. I think we've had comments from users and industry as well for more guidance. So I think as part of its continuing work, the ASEAN Taxonomy is doing that. But in relation to having a tool or reference that cuts across sectors, the foundation framework is that tool, being a principles-based taxonomy. So I think that's all the questions we have time for. I think, as I mentioned earlier, we will try to address the other questions that we have online. And to end this session, I'd like to thank my esteemed speakers, Pak Jarod, Emma, as well as Kun Tawachai for your participation in today's session. I think it's been a very fruitful discussion. Thank you all very much. Pass it back to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carol, and thank you as well to our distinguished panelists for sharing their experiences today. It has been a fruitful discussion and hopefully one of many more to come. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached the conclusion of our webinar session. We trust that you have gained valuable guidance on the practical applications of the ASEAN taxonomy and have acquired insightful perspectives on the progress of the taxonomy development across the region. For everyone's kind information, the slides used during today's webinar and a recording of the webinar will be made available on the SIFIA website at www.sfinstitute.asia in due course. Thank you once again for dedicating your time to join us today. We wish you well, please stay safe, and we look forward to your participation in our future events. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and see you soon.